Have you ever wondered if a single letter could change the way someone sees you forever? Imagine standing in a quiet room where every word on a page suddenly feels heavier than your own heartbeat. Now imagine the man you hope to marry reading those words out loud while you stand only a few feet away, unable to hide, unable to explain, and unable to stop what comes next. In many communities, traditions are respected, family values are protected, and trust is built over years rather than days. But what happens when one simple tradition opens the door to emotions that no one expected? Today's story explores a question that surprises many people. What Amish husbands are allowed to read before marriage. And in this unforgettable story, he read mine right in front of me. Before we begin, it's important to remember that Amish communities are diverse, and customs can differ from one community to another. This story is inspired by themes of faith, family, honesty, and tradition. It is a work of fiction created for storytelling and entertainment, while respecting the values often associated with Amish life. I grew up believing that words carried weight. Every promise mattered. Every conversation had purpose. In our quiet community, where life moved at a slower pace and relationships were built on patience instead of convenience, people paid attention to character far more than appearances. We didn't have the constant noise of modern life pulling us in every direction. Instead, every choice, every conversation, and every act of kindness became part of the story people remembered about you. As I grew older, I learned that marriage wasn't simply about falling in love. It was about trust, responsibility, and becoming part of another family. Courtship wasn't rushed. Every meeting, every visit, and every shared conversation meant something. People often asked questions about Amish marriage traditions, Amish courtship, and the values that guide these relationships. But very few understood the emotions hidden behind those traditions, the quiet hopes, the fears, and the moments when even the strongest heart begins to doubt itself. Then Daniel entered my life. He wasn't the loudest young man in the room, nor the one trying to impress everyone around him. He listened more than he spoke. He noticed the little things. When others hurried through conversations, he stayed behind to ask how someone was really doing. There was a calm confidence about him that made people feel comfortable without even realizing why. I admired that long before I admitted it to myself. As our families spent more time together, I started imagining a future I had never allowed myself to picture before. Every shared smile felt meaningful. Every respectful conversation made my hopes grow stronger. Yet beneath those hopes was a secret I had carried for years, not a crime, not a betrayal, but something deeply personal that I had never expected anyone else to read. I had written it down. What began as a private collection of thoughts had slowly become a record of my fears, dreams, mistakes, unanswered questions, and prayers. It wasn't meant for public eyes. It wasn't written to impress anyone. Those pages held the version of me that even my closest friends had never fully known. Whenever life became confusing, I turned to those pages instead of speaking aloud. They became the only place where I never had to pretend to be stronger than I felt. Then one ordinary morning, everything changed. A respected elder arrived with an unexpected request. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel's family was invited to visit that afternoon. No one explained why. No one smiled the way they usually did before family gatherings. The atmosphere felt different, almost as though everyone knew something I didn't. When the visitors finally arrived, conversation remained polite, but an unusual silence lingered beneath every word. After a few minutes, one folded bundle was placed carefully on the table. I recognized it immediately. My notebook. The one I believed had never left its hiding place. My hands turned cold. Questions raced through my mind. Who had found it? Why was it here? And why was Daniel looking at it with an expression I had never seen before? Then someone quietly said, "If we're going to build a future on honesty, perhaps these words should be heard." Daniel reached for the notebook. He opened the first page. He looked directly at me. And before I could find my voice, he began to read. The room became so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Daniel lowered his eyes to the first page, took a slow breath, and began reading in a calm voice. He wasn't speaking loudly, but every word seemed to fill the room. No one interrupted him. My parents sat with their hands folded, and his parents watched carefully, as if they were trying to understand not just the words on the page, but the person who had written them. I couldn't look at anyone. Instead, I stared at the wooden floor beneath my feet, wishing I could disappear. My notebook had never been meant for anyone else. It was where I had written about the days when I questioned myself, the moments when I felt hopeful, and the quiet prayers I never had the courage to say out loud. None of it was written to hide something terrible. It was simply the honest voice I kept to myself. Daniel continued reading. He came across a page where I had described how difficult it was to meet everyone's expectations. I had written about wanting to become a good wife someday, while secretly wondering if I was wise enough, patient enough, or strong enough for that responsibility. Hearing those private thoughts spoken aloud felt completely different from writing them. They no longer belonged only to me. No one in the room judged me with harsh words. In fact, their silence made everything feel even more uncertain. I couldn't tell what they were thinking. Were they disappointed? Were they surprised? Or were they seeing a side of me that I had tried so hard to keep hidden? Then Daniel reached another page and paused for a moment. His eyes stayed fixed on the notebook, and the expression on his face changed just enough for me to notice. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was something I couldn't quite understand, and that uncertainty made my heart beat even faster. For the first time, I wondered how the notebook had found its way into his hands. I had hidden it carefully in a small wooden chest inside my room. Only a few people even knew it existed. I replayed every recent day in my mind, searching for a moment when someone could have discovered it, but nothing made sense. The questions grew heavier with every passing second. Was this planned? Was it simply a misunderstanding? Or had someone believed that sharing my private words was the only way to test whether honesty could truly become the foundation of a future marriage? Daniel slowly turned another page. He looked up at me for just a brief moment before returning his eyes to the notebook. His next sentence began with the words, "There is something here that changes how I understand everything." And before anyone in the room could react, he continued reading. Every pair of eyes shifted toward Daniel as he continued reading. I wanted to ask him to stop, but the words never reached my lips. The sentence he had just spoken seemed to hang in the air. There is something here that changes how I understand everything. My heart raced as I tried to remember which page he had opened. I had written so many thoughts over the years that I could no longer recall every detail. He read a passage I had written months earlier after visiting an elderly widow in our community. I had admired her quiet strength and the way she spoke about marriage. She once told me that love was not proven by perfect days but by the willingness to stay kind during difficult ones. In my notebook, I had confessed that I feared disappointing the person I would one day marry. I worried that people often saw only my calm smile, while inside I carried doubts that I rarely shared with anyone. Daniel paused again, this time looking thoughtfully at the page instead of quickly turning it. His silence made everyone lean in just a little, waiting to hear what came next. My father glanced toward my mother, and although neither of them spoke, I could tell they were wondering the same thing I was. Why had this private notebook suddenly become so important? At the same time, another question refused to leave my mind. Someone had chosen to bring those pages into this room. That decision wasn't an accident. Whether it came from concern, curiosity, or a belief that complete honesty should come before an Amish marriage, someone had quietly changed the course of this day. Then Daniel closed the notebook for a brief moment and said, "Before I read the next page, I think everyone deserves to know how this notebook came into my hands." The room fell completely silent, because whatever answer came next had the power to change far more than my private words. No one moved. The silence stretched across the room until it felt almost impossible to breathe. Daniel rested the notebook gently on the table instead of holding it in his hands. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the weight behind every word. "I didn't go looking for this," he said. "It came to me, and before I opened it, I wasn't sure whether I should read it at all." My thoughts raced faster than ever. If he hadn't searched for it, then who had brought it to him? I looked around the room, hoping someone's expression would give me an answer, but every face remained thoughtful and quiet. My parents seemed just as surprised as I was. Daniel's family exchanged brief glances but said nothing. Whatever had happened had clearly begun long before everyone gathered in this room. Daniel explained that only that morning, someone had quietly placed the notebook into his hands with a simple request. The person believed the pages contained something he needed to understand before making any decision about the future. There had been no pressure, no dramatic warning, only the suggestion that honesty should come before promises. Even now, Daniel refused to reveal who had given it to him. He said the reason would only make sense after everyone understood the full story. That answer created even more questions than it solved. I searched my memory again, wondering who could have found my notebook and why they believed sharing it was the right thing to do. Every possibility led to another mystery. The notebook had never been hidden carelessly. Someone had discovered it, recognized its importance, and made a deliberate choice. Daniel slowly opened it once more. His fingers stopped on a page near the middle, one I recognized by the worn corner I had folded years ago. The moment I saw it, my heart nearly stopped. I remembered exactly what was written there, and if he read those words aloud, nothing between our families would ever feel quite the same again. As Daniel rested his hand on the worn page, I could almost see the memory returning before my eyes. I had folded that corner years ago because I never wanted to forget what I had written that evening. It wasn't a confession of wrongdoing or a hidden betrayal. It was a promise I had made to myself after watching two families struggle through a misunderstanding that could have been avoided with one honest conversation. At the time, I believed no one would ever read those words except me. Daniel looked up before reading another line. "This page isn't about secrets," he said quietly. "It's about fear." His words caught everyone by surprise. I felt my shoulders tense as he continued. He read how I had worried that people sometimes judged others before asking questions. I had written that trust could disappear in a single moment, while earning it back could take years. More than anything, I hoped the person I married would listen before reaching conclusions. The room remained silent. Instead of creating distance, those words seemed to make everyone think more carefully. Even so, the mystery of the notebook had not disappeared. If anything, it had become even more important. Why had someone believed these private reflections needed to be shared before a marriage could move forward? Then Daniel carefully turned one more page. Tucked between the sheets was a small folded piece of paper that I had completely forgotten about. It slipped from the notebook and landed softly on the table. Every eye in the room followed it. I stared at it in disbelief. I hadn't seen that note in years. I wasn't even sure what it contained anymore. The paper had yellowed with time, and my handwriting was visible through the fold, but only a few words could be made out. Daniel frowned slightly. "This wasn't on the pages I read earlier," he said. One of the elders gently picked up the folded note and handed it back to Daniel without opening it. "If it belongs with the notebook," he said, "then it should stay with the notebook." Daniel unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the first few lines, and for the first time that afternoon, his expression changed completely. He didn't look disappointed. He looked genuinely puzzled. He read the opening sentence to himself again before raising his eyes toward me. "I don't think you wrote this," he said quietly. The words struck the room like a sudden gust of wind. If I hadn't written the note, then someone else had placed it inside my notebook long before anyone found it. And that meant this story wasn't only about my private journal anymore. It was about a message from an unknown person, one that had remained hidden until this very moment, waiting to be discovered when it could change everything. Daniel looked back down at the folded note, then carefully read it aloud. The message was short, written in handwriting that was clearly different from mine. If these pages are ever read, remember this. Do not judge the writer by one moment or one fear. Read every page before you decide who she truly is. A wave of confusion swept through the room. I shook my head almost immediately. "I didn't write that," I said quietly. "I've never even seen it before." For the first time all afternoon, the elder who had remained silent spoke. He asked everyone to pause before making assumptions. "The note asks for patience," he said. "Perhaps we should follow its own advice." Daniel nodded without hesitation. Instead of stopping at the folded page, he continued reading through the rest of the notebook. As the minutes passed, the mood in the room slowly changed. The later entries spoke about gratitude, responsibility, forgiveness, and the kind of marriage I hoped to build one day. They weren't the words of someone hiding a dangerous secret. They were the honest reflections of a young woman trying to grow into the person she believed she should become. When Daniel finally closed the notebook, he looked directly at me. "These pages don't make me trust you less," he said with a gentle smile. "They make me understand you better. You were never pretending to be perfect. You were trying to become better every day." The tension that had filled the room seemed to disappear all at once. My parents let out quiet breaths of relief, and Daniel's family exchanged warm smiles. The notebook that had seemed capable of dividing everyone had done the opposite. It had started conversations that probably should have happened long before that day. Then the elder revealed something none of us had expected. Several years earlier, while helping repair the small wooden chest where I kept my notebook, he had found the loose note tucked beneath its lining. Unsure where it belonged, he had slipped it inside the notebook for safekeeping, intending to ask me about it later. Time had passed, and he had completely forgotten about it. He apologized for the confusion, admitting that his simple decision had unintentionally created the mystery that brought everyone together. I thought the story had finally reached its end. But as everyone prepared to leave, Daniel picked up the notebook one last time. A tiny envelope, hidden inside the back cover, slid onto the table. It had never been opened. My name wasn't written on it. His was. And in that moment, we realized the notebook had been keeping one final secret that neither of us knew existed. For a long moment, no one reached for the small envelope. It rested on the table as if it had been waiting patiently for years. Daniel looked at me, silently asking whether he should open it. I nodded. Whatever answers remained, we would face them together. He carefully unfolded the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was old but familiar. It belonged to my grandfather, who had passed away when I was still young. I had completely forgotten that he often tucked encouraging notes into books and journals for family members to discover later. Daniel began to read. The letter was simple. My grandfather explained that if anyone ever found the note, he hoped they would remember one lesson above all else: a lasting marriage is not built on never making mistakes. It is built on honesty, patience, and the willingness to understand someone's heart before judging their words. He wrote that every person carries private fears, but those fears should become opportunities for compassion rather than reasons for doubt. As the final sentence was read, tears filled my eyes. Suddenly everything made sense. My grandfather had seen how much I loved writing my thoughts down. Without telling anyone, he had slipped the letter into the back of my notebook, believing I would eventually discover it when the time was right. Instead, life had taken unexpected turns, and the message reached both Daniel and me together. Daniel folded the letter carefully and smiled. "I think your grandfather just gave us the best advice we could have received." Everyone in the room quietly agreed. The notebook that had caused so much uncertainty had become a reminder that trust grows stronger when people choose understanding over assumptions. The mystery had ended not with accusations or conflict, but with a lesson our families would remember for years. As Daniel handed the notebook back to me, I realized I no longer wanted to hide it away. Those pages were part of my journey. They showed my questions, my hopes, and the person I was becoming. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt grateful that someone had taken the time to read them with kindness instead of judgment. Looking back, people sometimes ask what Amish husbands are allowed to read before marriage or whether one notebook truly changed our future. My answer is always the same. Traditions may differ from one Amish community to another, but every strong relationship depends on honesty, respect, and listening with an open heart. In the end, it wasn't the notebook that shaped our future, it was the choice to trust each other after every question had been answered. And that choice became the first chapter of a life we were both ready to build together.